What's up, guys? Live by TCG. New logo, new name. If you guys like it, all the other videos are still up, and I'm obviously not going to edit the intros and everything for those, so go check it out. This week, just an update to my Tortured Existence forays into Pauper. Last night was the third week of just like the weekly local events. I've just done a few updates to the deck, things I've learned. I thought I might quickly share those. So I'll quickly run through the deck, just the usual. The mana base, also go check out my last video on the deck if you haven't seen that, just so you can have an idea of where I'm starting from and some comparisons you can make between the two lists. So the mana, I think compared to the last week's list, I just switched one Evolving Wilds and added another Rot Farm. So I have 4 Jungle Hollow, 4 Golgari Guildgate, 7 Swamps, 5 Forests, 1 Evolving Wilds, and 3 Rot Farm. Rot Farm's really good. Like the fact that it's slow doesn't really matter in Pauper, but giving yourself like an extra drawing a land basically is really important. Just the incremental card advantage. I think 4 might be too many because you don't want to have opening hands that are all Rot Farms because they're unplayable obviously, but 3 seems good. Again, the rest of the mana base I'm not super sure about it. Some people play cycling lands, which I think is a cool idea. In the late game you can return them with Tilling Treefolk to rebuy more creatures, or you can, if they're in play, you can bounce them with the Rot Farm and turn them into more creatures that way, so that seems like an interesting option. 4 Tortured Existence, 4 Commune with the Gods. Standard. Really good. Wouldn't change that. 3 Brownscale, 3 Stinkweed Imp. 2 Stinkweed Imp. This mix still seems pretty good. One thing you could possibly do is just add 1 more Stinkweed Imp. I've seen some people suggest playing the other ratio, so like 3 and 2, but I don't think that's correct. I think more Brownscale is better, but it's pretty close either way. Yeah, so if I was gonna change this, I'd just add 1 more Stinkweed Imp, but I don't think that's necessary. There's only been like 1 game where I've lost because I didn't have a Dredger and I kept top decking lands when I needed a creature. So I think this is probably enough. Excuse me. So 4 Putrid Leech still. I think this card is just too good. When you don't have Tortured Existence, like it's just the best, most efficient creature. And when you do have Tortured Existence, it's still like one of the best things that you can return. If you don't need anything specific, you just need a good card. You know, going into combat versus like Chittering Rats and what else is there? Chittering Rats, the Ninja, all those kind of things. Grey Merchant, you can pump it to kill that, and then you know, just having the flexibility to activate it or not. You know, it's just a really good card in all these mid-range situations. One thing that I will say about this is that what I've sort of realized is that you basically never want to, like if you attack and your opponent is tapped out or whatever and they don't block, it's basically almost never correct to pump it. Not feeling so good. Anyway, yeah, it's basically always wrong. You're the late game deck. You want to conserve your life total. Once you have your engine going, you're basically unbeatable. So you don't really want to try to get yourself into a race. That's an important tip. The next card, 3 Crypt Rats. So I mentioned in the previous video maybe going up to 3. Crypt Rats is again just like a really strong card, just like Putrid Leech. It's a good board clear in the games where you are still looking for your Tortured Existence. And the other thing is that it also combos really well with Putrid Leech, because a lot of creatures in Pauper have 3 or less toughness, so you can activate your Putrid Leech, Crypt Rats for 3, clear your whole opponent's whole board, and then attack them for like 4 or 8. That can really put a lot of pressure on your opponent very quickly. So yeah, the 3rd Crypt Rats I thought was good. Two Grave Scrabbler. In the last video I had a big discussion about Grave Scrabbler versus Reassembling Skeleton, and I seemed like more confident that, well, one skeleton is entirely essential, and then is Grave Scrabbler better than second skeleton? It's more unclear. So that's what I thought 2 weeks ago. So now I say that 2 Grave Scrabblers, and I'm not playing any skeletons, so this is just so much more efficient than the skeleton. When you're comboing it with Tortured Existence, and they're both basically unplayable when you don't have a Tortured Existence, so you might as well just hedge towards the stronger one. That's basically all there is to say about this card. You still need to play, like, I think at least 2 copies of this effect, because in situations where you're like Spore Frog locking people, you need a way to be able to eventually draw something that's not a Spore Frog. Like if you're just dredging every turn and giving yourself a Spore Frog, then if you're not doing anything else, then you're not ramping your mana, you're not deploying more threats onto the board, anything like that. So you need a way to sort of like get card advantage off your Tortured Existence somehow. Next, so okay, Thorn of the Black Rose and Augur of Skulls, and Tilling Treefolk. So I talked about these last week. I sort of said they're like very powerful, unique, strong one-off creatures that I probably wouldn't want to cut, and that's been the impression still so far. All of these are very good. I wouldn't replace them. Next, 1 Caterpillar. So I mentioned in the previous video that this was maybe too greedy to play 2, so I cut it back down to 1. I also talked about Wickerbough Elder being a possible option. This is better, just because in the matchups where you want to kill multiple stuff, it puts itself in the graveyard so you can recur it back again. And then, because you don't want to have to rely on the combo with the Fume Spitter to reuse your Wickerbough Elder. And then it's also just cheaper if you need to like bring it back and then straight away blow up a Pestilence or something. It just costs overall less mana than Wickerbough Elder to do that. So those 2 reasons get the nod, even though like a 4 mana 4/4 is probably overall better than a 1 mana 1/1. Caterpillar is still just a little bit better in this deck, I think. 2 Fume Spitter and 2 Spore Frog. So I think last week, or the last video, I only had 1 Spore Frog main deck. Aggro decks are like a really problem matchup because you don't have any removal really, except for the Crypt Rats. So once your opponent starts making big creatures, you can't really ever deal with it. So I added another main deck Spore Frog. This hasn't really let me down so far, but in some matchups obviously Fog isn't that exciting. And then 2 Fume Spitters. How many was I playing last time? Let's check. 2. Okay. Yep, this card's pretty good. Can't ever really be that bad. I could consider playing only 1, just because it's a little bit mediocre. It's not very good against the red-white deck. Yeah, so it's in a sort of weird situation where you want it against decks that have like X1 creatures, but where Crypt Rats isn't that good. Because obviously versus like Elves or something like that, Crypt Rats is just a lot better. So it's specifically good against like Delver, I mean, it's fine against elves, but Crypt Rats is fine, and Crypt Rats is more of a liability against something like Delver because it's hard to get enough mana that you can play it and activate it for 2 in 1 turn through like a counter spell or whatever. So then it's vulnerable to like lightning bolt and things like that. So yeah, maybe only one of this is fine, but you know, most decks play creatures, you'll probably find a target for this somewhere along the line. But be aware that this is maybe one of the more underwhelming cards. Then, so we're just trickling through the last few one-offs. So Horror of the Broken Lands. My opinion on this card hasn't really changed. I don't think it's very good. Like the 4 mana, the 5 mana 4/4 with the trigger. Like, you just never ever win games this way by playing this card and then activating Tortured Existence a bunch of times and then cracking for like a huge amount of damage. That just doesn't really ever happen. But it cycles, so I keep holding out on it. I think maybe like one day, you know, I'll see that it like breaks a big board stall or something by making itself huge, or who knows. Like it wins in time by dealing 20 damage in 1 turn or something nuts, but I never really see the point in this card. Like the fact that cycles for 1 mana is nice because it helps you like turbo dredge sometimes, like if you're really digging for something specific. So that's quite fine as well. So yeah, not terrible, but not great either. I'm still not sure whether it's worth playing or not. So next, where are we at? So we've shown the tree. So I have 2 more cards that find lands. One is I put 1 Krosan Tusker in the deck. Just having access to this like card advantage element is really good. It's good to have a way to develop your mana under a Tortured Existence, like consistently and in a way that gives you card advantage. It's a nice effect to have access to. Like initially I thought this effect would be like too clunky and slow, but you know, obviously I think Golgari Rot Farm is good. So if that's the format where Karus are strong, then Krosan Tusker is probably quite good as well. So 1 Krosan Tusker seems fine. And then the last card, this was my own bit of tech. I haven't seen anyone else use this, but it wouldn't surprise me if they have. 1 Fa'adiyah Seer. So if anybody doesn't know what this does, it has the ability to tap, draw a card, and reveal it. And then if it's not a land, you discard it. So already by itself, this is like a kind of weird Merfolk looter, where sometimes it just mills 1, and sometimes it draws a land. So that's like decent by itself. But it has a really good, strong interaction with the dredge mechanic, where it says draw a card and reveal it. If it isn't a land card, discard it. So how this works is that it means the card that you drew. So if you tap and you replace the draw with the dredge, then you haven't drawn a card, you've dredged a card. So the rest of the effect just disappears. So even though this isn't a land, you don't have to discard it. So at that point it just becomes tap, draw a card basically, which is really, really strong. So overall I've been solidly impressed with the Fa'adiyah Seer. In the early game it's like a kind of slightly different Satyr Wayfinder basically, that kind of effect. You just keep tapping it a few times and you just draw cards with some frequency. I mean, it feels bad when you do this and you like mill a Tortured Existence when you haven't found it yet, but by the same idea you could have like milled over a creature that made your Tortured Existence 1 closer, right? Like you never know. This is sort of like the don't loot quote unquote debate from last year or whenever that was. But yeah, so One Fa'adiyah Seer is quite good. I think this card is probably better than like Seder Wayfinder, unless your opponent is like mono bolts and electrickeries and stuff. Yep. So 3 more cards to go. 1 Deadly Recluse still. This is bad. So maybe against specifically Delver of Secrets it's okay, because they have 1/1 flyers. That's like the only deck that has 1/1 flyers. But I think that if you want to play a slot on this kind of card, then it needs to have at least, it needs to be basically like Giant Spider size. Like it needs to have at least 3 power and at least 3 toughness. Well, maybe not at least 3 power, but like it needs to not, it would preferably not die to Delver of Secrets. It would preferably kill a core Skyfisher. And I think you might have to like accept that you're not killing a core Skyfisher. So the obvious option is the Penumbra Spider, which I talked about last week. So that's not one of these 2 cards left, so I cut that. So maybe I should put that back in. Another option that might be worth considering is the there's like a giant spider with Infect from Scars of Murden block. And the reason why that card seems quite nice is that you can block a core Skyfisher with it, and then it will obviously just lose all its power. So you can, it's neutralized at that point. Yeah. So you know you want to be able to wall off the red-white deck, because that's quite a difficult matchup. Like they just deal too much damage too quickly before you can stabilize. So you do need some big blockers that can hold off all the Glinthawks and stuff. So Deadly Recluse doesn't really do that job, which basically leaves Deadly Recluse as like a removal spell for Geomag Anglers, and maybe like a Ulabox Crusher if you're desperate. So if I wanted a card for that role, I think what I would want to try is Ruthless Ripper, the like Morph Assassin that drains them for 2. That might be just like a better Death Touch guy for 1 mana instead of 2. So yeah, these are all things to think about. So I still have the 1 Frightcrawler. Now I just think that like this idea is not the right mindset for playing it. So to reinforce or restate where I was at with that before, like against Monarch decks that don't play black, usually, or black creatures, usually you have a way to attack through and take the Monarch, and then against big board stalls where you're hiding behind Spore Frog, you have a way to win the game. So I just don't think it's the right idea in this deck to play like a 3/3 attacking creature that can't block. Like your late game is just too strong. Rather than trying to sort of like thread the needle and like play this fear guy that could like snipe the Monarch, you'd rather just play like a big spider, make sure that you don't die, and then like even if they draw a few extra cards off the Monarch late game, you can just like, what are they going to do with the Monarch? Well, if they use burn spells on your creatures, you can just revive them back with Grave Scrabbler and you can regain the advantage that way. If they throw all the burn spells at your face, you could just Brownscale a bunch of times and then you can gain the advantage back that way. And then if they deploy a bunch of Skyfishes and Glinthawks, you can just Crypt Rats them all away and neutralize their advantage that way. So it just doesn't really make much sense. And then versus the, like if you want to, if you're afraid your opponent's going to have like a 10/10 lifelink boggle and you're not going to have any idea how to win the game, that could be a concern, possibly. I think maybe in that situation you just have to rely on Crypt Rats activations to close it out. and possibly Horror of the Broken Lands, just attacking through for like a ton of damage. So Frightcrawler was like a cute idea, and it seemed to work in the first like 1 or 2 games of testing. It seemed like the right plan, but just the wrong. More testing has shown that it's like the wrong game plan for those matchups. It's very hard for you to be the aggro deck in any matchup, honestly. Like that was the trap that I fell into. Putrid Leech fell into with like using my Putrid Leeches too aggressively, and then I would suddenly like lose the game to Grey Merchants and stuff. You just want to be the control deck basically almost all the time. Versus combo is the exception, and maybe versus Tron, but I need to test that more as well. Then the last card is one Mindlash Sliver. So in a previous build of the deck, I tested a version that had Carrion Feeder. This was like in the second week, which I didn't make a video about. And then in that version, I tried one Black Cat because I had the like funny idea that you could return the Black Cat every turn, and then sacrifice it in your opponent's draw step to the Carrion Feeder and make them discard whenever they drew. So your opponent's draw step would be like locked out for the rest of the game. So what I have instead of that, because Carrion Feeder sucks because it has the same problem as Frightcrawler, and you don't have hardly any free creatures to stack to it. So instead of that Carrion Feeder Black Cat idea, instead now I'm just playing one Mindlash Sliver. And in testing, I thought this was pretty cool. The drawback is it's only a 1-mana 1/1, but it has the same ability to destroy your opponent's draw step every turn, which is a nice threat to have access to. Like if your opponent ever goes Hellbent and you have like a Putrid Leech and they don't really have anything, then suddenly, or they have like 1/2/2 or whatever, then suddenly you can bring this back, and like they're just stuck forever. The other thing you can do with this is if your last card is a creature and you have Tortured Existence out, then you activate Tortured Existence, discarding your last card, and then you hold priority and you activate this. So your opponent will discard a card, you have an empty hand, so you can't discard a card, and then your Tortured Existence resolves and you return whatever you targeted with it. So that's like a cute little trick you can do. So far I've been liking this card. Maybe it's like a little bit too underpowered and it suffers from the problem that it's only good, really good in situations where you're already ahead. But having a way to sort of like just make both players discard cards might be correct in certain matchups. And it's also like a fringed marginal benefit that in games where you can't find your Tortured Existence, you have another Madness Enabler for your Grave Scrabbler. And it also just helps you put a card in the graveyard so you can get your Tortured Existence chain going. So that's the whole deck. Yeah, so the main two things I would change are cutting these. I put the Penumbra Spider back in for one of those. Maybe cut one Fume Spitter. But everything else seemed pretty solid. In the sideboard, so I played the Penumbra Spider in the sideboard. This was a great decision. Obviously I missed it in the main deck, and there are just matchups where you want to cut like the Spore Frogs and the weird utility cards. So you just want, in those matchups typically you just want some big strong mid-range guy, and the Spider's the best. Fume Spitter, more Spore Frog, just for the matchups where these are good. And then I played the one Wickerbough Elder in the sideboard. So having a one Wickerbough and one Caterpillar in the 75 seems probably fine. Two Faerie Macabre. I played against like a red-black reanimated deck that exhumes Ulamog's Crusher with like Dragon Breath, and the backup plan is Gurmag Angler. Against that deck, Faerie Macabre is just like a big blowout, and it's also pretty good against other weird graveyard combo decks, like the I don't even know if it's a real thing, like a competitive deck, but that chases a Erasure deck. So I'd probably play one more of these if I had one, but the vendor or the singles guy at the store didn't have any in stock, so there you go. One Quagmire Druid. I cut this down to one just because it didn't seem necessary to have two. It's probably a bit overboard. 4 Tainted Well still. I've never boarded this in yet. I have no idea if it's good or if I should just stop playing it because it seems nobody locally plays Tron. But I sort of want to have the idea of like building this deck for a general metagame. And 1 Faceless Butcher. This is sort of my replacement for Heartstabber Mosquito. I think it's much worse in this build compared to the build not from the previous video but from 1 week ago where I had the carrion feeders, because not having a sack outlet to abuse the trigger makes it a lot worse. So I'm not sure if that's good enough or not. And then 3 Deadweights. So these are for aggro decks and for Delver decks, where you just need a way to clear stuff off the board while you build up your mana advantage. So yeah, you know, some elements of the sideboard are solid and some are not so hot. Maybe Gnaw to the Bone is needed somewhere because I lost a burn. I was like 1 turn away from getting the Brownscale going and he killed me. And then in the second game I had more of like an aggressive draw with some Putrid Leeches and stuff, but he was just a bit too fast still, so maybe some Gnaw to the Bone is needed somewhere in the deck if burn is a thing. So the sideboard's still not that set, and neither is the main deck, but I feel like it's getting more towards like a focused end product, which I like, but it still doesn't seem quite strong compared to some of the decks I'm playing against. So yeah, maybe I can figure out it's more of a sideboard to beat those linear decks and the decks like the Monarch, Red-White Monarch and those kind of things. Just by shifting the game plan a little bit in the main deck, those problems can be solved. So, but yeah, sometimes the deck just feels like it's a little bit maybe too dependent on Tortured Existence, but then at other times it feels like when you have it in play you just can't lose. So it's definitely a fun deck and I'm happy to keep playing it in the future. That is all I have to say, really. So this is Li-Fi TCG signing out.